Because aller is a stage 3 verb in the passé composé, I must determine the gender and number of the subject to decide if I need to add an E or an S to the past participle of aller. The subject of this sentence is Jean et Claude. Thus, the subject is masculine plural. Since the subject is masculine, I do not need to add an E. Since the subject is plural, I do need to add an S to my past participle. Thus, my final sentence is Jean et Claude sont allés. John and Claude went. To review, to create stage 3 passé composé, instead of using avoir, you select the appropriate form of être. As well, you need the past participle of your verb. ER changes to E accent aigu, RE changes to U, and IR changes to I. Plus, you must make sure that your past participle agrees in gender and in number with the subject of the sentence by adding either an E if the subject is feminine or S if the subject is plural. Let's use sortir as an example. Sortir is a stage 3 verb in the passé composé because stage 3 verbs express motion, and sortir means to exit. Suppose I want to say we exited. First, I use the appropriate form of être, which is nous sommes, and then I transform sortir to its past participle form. Sortir is an IR verb in the passé composé. IR verbs change to I. Because sortir is a stage 3 verb in the passé composé, I must determine the gender and the number of the subject to determine if I need to add an E or an S to the past participle of sorti. The subject of the sentence is nous. But since nous means we don't exactly have context for who this nous is. Is it a group of girls? Is it a group of guys who are saying this? So to provide more context, here's who the nous is talking about. Moi, I will be impersonating Melissa. Moi, Claire, et Marie. We now have enough context to make a determination on whether or not we need to add anything to our past participle. Since I'm playing the role of Melissa, our subject is feminine. So we need to add an E to our past participle. And because it's me, Melissa, Claire, and Marie, a group of girls, it is also plural. So we need to add an S to our past participle as well. Our final sentence is nous sommes sortis. We exited. Let's take that same sentence and modify who we is talking about. So in this context, the we in that sentence is moi, so I'm impersonating Thomas, Claude et Martin. In this instance, the subject is not feminine, since Thomas, Claude, and Martin are guys. However, our subject is plural because Thomas, Claude, and Martin are a group of guys. And so our final sentence is nous sommes sortis. We exited. As a check for understanding, instead of using avoir, motion verbs in French use what other auxiliary verb? Motion verbs in French use être instead of avoir. Motion verbs, or stage 3 verbs in the Passé Composé, in French must make sure that their ed form, or their past participles, agree with what two things about the subject? Motion verbs in French must make sure that their ed forms, or their past participles, agree with the gender and the number of the subject. Past participles agree in gender by adding the letter E, whereas the past participle agrees in number by adding what letter? By adding the letter S. The following is a bit of guided practice. What this will entail is you creating the sentence based on what we've already learned in the video. So suppose I have the verb descendre. How would you say au passé composé, she descended, or she went down? Well, our first step is to make sure that we have the appropriate form of être, which is elle est. Descendre is an RE verb, so we need to make sure that we convert RE verbs to U. So descendu. Our final step now is to determine whether or not our subject requires us to add an E or an S to our past participle. Our subject is elle. Therefore, being feminine, we need to add an E to our past participle. Elle, in this instance, is singular, so we do not need to add an S. Our final sentence is elle est descendue. Let's try retourner. How would you say I returned? The context for this is important. The person saying I returned is Melissa. We need our appropriate form of avoir, which is je suis, along with changing our infinitive to its past participle. ER verbs change to accent aigu. Now we need to determine whether or not we need to add an E or an S to our past participle based on the number and gender of our subject. The je in this sentence is Melissa. And because Melissa is a girl, we certainly need to add an E to our past participle. But Melissa is only one person, which means we don't need to add an S. Our final sentence, je suis retourné. Looking at entrer, how would you say y'all entered? Context for this is also important. The y'all, or the group of you who you're referring to, is simply a group of boys. Our first step is to choose the appropriate form of être, which is vous êtes, and then change our infinitive to our past participle. ER verbs change to accent aigu. We now need to analyze whether or not we need to add an E or an S to our past participle, depending on whether or not our subject is feminine or plural. If we look at vous, we're referring to a group of guys. So we do not need to add an E. However, since it is a group of guys plural, we certainly need to add an S to our past participle. Our final sentence is vous êtes entrés. Let's look at entrée again. But this time I want you to say y'all entered, but we're talking about un groupe de filles, a group of girls. Again, our first step is to choose the appropriate form of être, which is vous êtes, and to change our infinitive to our past participle. Er verbs in the passé composé change to e accent aigu. Our next step now is to determine whether or not we need to add an E or an S to our past participle, depending on whether or not our subject is singular or feminine. Vous is referring to a group of girls. Girls are feminine. Therefore, we certainly need to add an E to our past participle. And since we're talking about a groupe de filles, we must add an S. Our final sentence is vous êtes entrés. We're going to look now at arriver. And how would you say you arrived? I want you to use the vous form, and you're talking to Professor Harper, me. So you're talking to Professor Harper, a male. So how would you say you arrived? You need your appropriate form of être, which is vous êtes, once again, and then you need to change your infinitive to its past participle. Er verbs change to e accent aigu. We need now look at our past participle. You're talking to me, a guy, so you don't need to add an E, and since I'm only one person, you don't need to add an S either. So your sentence is vous êtes arrivé. Let's take arrivé again. How would you say you arrived? Now you're talking to Madame Harper. Again, you need your appropriate form of être, vous êtes, along with your past participle, arrivé. If you look at your past participle, Madame Harper is certainly a girl, so you need to add an E. But you do not need to add an S because Madame Harper is simply one person. So your final sentence is vous êtes arrivé. So just as another check for understanding, instead of using avoir, motion verbs in French use what other auxiliary verb? Motion verbs in French use être instead of avoir as their auxiliary verb. Motion verbs in French, stage 3 verbs in French, must make sure that their ed form or their past participles agree with what two things about the subject? They must agree with the gender and number of the subject. The past participle agrees in gender by adding the letter E, whereas the past participle agrees in number by adding what letter? S. The following is independent practice. What you'll be doing is filling in the correct answer, and I won't be giving any commentary about why the correct answer is so. So let's look at our first one. Hier, Thomas est arrivé à l'école à 9 heures. Hier, nous sommes sortis de l'école à 15 heures. Hier, je suis descendu des escaliers.